Again for your dedicated support and continuation of the Region 9. I don't know why I'm talking around my computer.
Yeah, we'll have
So anyway, while I fix this right quick, go back and forth. Okay, so tonight, again, we're really brief. We're gonna go through a good planning 101 exercise of land use, zoning, development policy areas, really kind of answer a lot of questions you guys may have about the whole zoning aspect of what it is that the next part of this process is. Is as you guys have known, the next big piece of the puzzle is going to be reviewing the zoning applications as well as consistency changes. What is the consistency change? You'll find out tonight, right? So, there's a lot of pieces regarding to the zoning that we want to make sure everyone has a foundation of knowledge going into it. So some of you who have been through Plan 2040 or may do this for a living or just have a really good nerdy fascination with zoning like us, please pay attention. Feel free to ask questions, because even though you think you know something, you know there's times where you may think something differently, right? So we're here to have a good conversation, really good education, and then for the very end, we're gonna do a little mapping exercise to kind of get more hands-on with the learning today to prepare us for the April 20th meeting. But before all that, we do have a couple things. So just the standard housekeeping aspects.
You ready for me?
No, the agenda and the
Yeah.
notes.
Okay, I'm gonna do it from there.
Oh, perfect, yeah, here we go.
Aye.
One with you, yeah.
Who's on first? Anyway, I'm Kate Bauer. For those of you in the audience, I'm excited to share this really great group of people. If you're gonna stay and make comments, you're welcome to observe the meeting. At the end, we'll have time set aside for anybody who wants to make a 1-2-minute presentation. We have lots worth, we'd love to hear. Couple of housekeeping notes. We need the agenda approved. Anybody have changes to the agenda for tonight? All in favor of accepting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We need approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any changes to the notes from the last meeting?
There is one quick thing, Matt Minahan, last name is misspelled twice. That's what my apology. Other than fixing that, there's nothing from staff point of view.
Any other changes? Can I have a motion to accept? The changes? Second,
Second.
Nikki, anybody all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So back to you and then back to me.
Perfect, yeah, real quick.
Okay.
So again, this is kind of where we're at in the process, section 5 of the full process. The introduction and discussion of land use and zoning, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. We're almost to the end of this, but it's very important, and we'll mention this a couple more times before you leave us, to stay with the process, right? Even though you guys will be done relatively soon, we still have the planning advisory board and county council to go through. It's very important and very key that each of you continue to stay involved in the process, even potentially show your support or ideas or your testimonies at the PAB and county council. You guys work very hard on this whole process, and it's important to make sure everyone hears your voice outside of what's on paper.
The question, is the PAB a Zoom thing or is that an in-person thing?
It's been a hybrid. Jesse can kind of talk a little more.
Yeah. Hi, if you attend the planning advisory board meetings, you will in fact see me there. It is usually hybrid. Typically the board meets in the room at 2664 Riva Road. And there is a Zoom component, so members of the public are welcome to either join us in the room or on Zoom.
When are the meetings typically?
The planning advisory board meets the second and fourth Wednesday of the month on an as-needed basis. So if there's not an agenda item to discuss, the meeting gets canceled.
What time?
Oh, yes, 6 p.m.
And while Jet's over here is finishing talking, next to her is Cindy Carrier, which is our long-range planning administrator. And then we have Joe Jenkins, who works in our zoning division. So they're gonna be here to help answer any questions that may arise that you guys would like to hear from. And we also eventually will have Christina Pompa later. She is the deputy planning zoning officer. So just really quick, I know we talked about outreach before, and we just want to give another update. Here are some things we've done recently. We attended the Unity Day on March 19th, Maryland Day, March 24th, and we were at the Connected Devices giveaway on March 29th, which was a really cool event. I think Carla asked me to pass out the information, so thank you. It was really, all these events were really cool. We got to hear a lot of new people, a lot of your voices that we may not only get to hear if we weren't doing these things. So if you ever have any new events that are coming out that you think we should be aware of, please send it our way. And we'll do our best to make sure we have some type of attendance there. We're also working with the South River High School, their signature program. There's a group of students that are basically kind of working on their own mini projects specific to Region 9. And it's really cool to see the youth involved and passionate about their community as well. So we can provide more information when they finish their project. And I'll mention this later, but the transportation strategies drop-in session will be April 11th. It's at the Captain Adrian Museum. I believe it's from 1 to 6. I have the time on the last slide. And then we also have an online questionnaire that will be on the hub site as usual from April 8th to May 6th. And we're also going to be meeting with the London Town Association on next Thursday.
Is the transportation strategy for Region 9 or the whole county or what?
Yeah, the Region 9. And then I will pass this back to Kate.
Thank you, sir. So just a couple of things. First off, I want to thank everybody who completed the survey. I know I had to chase people, and those of you who responded, I appreciate it. We really need to hear from you in this process. And the strategies were really kind of the warm-up for the zoning piece. We need everybody to fill out the work on the zoning. And I know it's going to be a pain. I started doing it based on what you sent us. It's going to take a while, but it's really critical that all of our voices be heard in terms of response to the recommendations of the request for zoning changes, the rationale from staff, and whether or not individually we agree so that we find out where we have consensus. And we don't have to spend limited time that we have chewing over things we agree on, but rather can talk about the things where we have differences. So that's going to be really important. That I know you're going to tell us more about that, but that's going to be the focus of the April 20th meeting. And it's a really fascinating thing to look at the rationales and requests and see how they stack up against the strategies that we've put in place and where you stand on them. Take good notes for yourself before you sit down at the Survey Monkey to fill in the responses so that you know why you're saying what you think, you know. What
Is this one we've already gotten, a survey we've already gotten, or one we're to get?
We sent it out this afternoon, so if you have it.
It's in your inbox.
It's brand new.
Along with everything else. So,
Kate, I guess this is directed, I sort of had I mentioned this to Eric and a couple of folks with the county. I have some issues with the Survey Monkey in itself. And that it is, when you are filling out, at least for me, maybe I'm different than everybody else, but in filling out and writing comments, it's very hard to go back and read what you just wrote. So you don't know which, if you missed anything and it's just, it needs to be modified. I talked to Eric about it, and I don't know if anybody else has had problems with it or not, but it is not, it is not good enough for what we need to do, what we're going to be doing. If we're going to be doing a lot of writing, I can't just see a little line of words going by and not go back and read what I've read until I've finished it.
So if I can jump in real quick, I'm sorry. We are going to go through the example tonight. We've modified it a little bit to help with the issues of the text. but essentially, and you'll see it when we go through later tonight, that we broke it up, so it's much smaller bites per section, because we have, I think, 8 different surveys now. One for each community, and in each that, it's almost a simple yes, no, disagree kind of thing on that, questionnaire. So if you guys don't mind holding your questions and comments about the survey until we get the report later this afternoon, that we may answer a lot of your questions ahead.
I was
Okay,
gonna say, that you could probably, something I do, or I do a lot with that type of. Recommendation is to put it all in a Word document or a Google document and then just copy and paste it over. That way you can go back and you can look at what you.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
that was,
So
a
let's,
lifetime.
let's hold the. There's one over here in the corner, Anthony.
Okay.
Until we get to that part of the session.
Sorry for being late. We had a great meeting with Captain Avery. And until we
Yep.
realized you weren't there. I just.
Did you miss? So, to frame our conversation for tonight, I want to review some revenues. I talked about the, speaking of Captain Avery, I think I talked about those at the Captain Avery meeting. But just to see some ground rules for our conversation that I think are going to be important as we talk about zoning and we talk about strategy. The first is stop talk. We want to hear from everybody in pieces, but we want to make room for everybody to speak. So one of the challenges in social discussion is the more you talk, the less other people can speak and the less you're listening. So this is not only talking, but and listening. Stop. Imagine the different points of view of people around the table who have different perspectives than you do. Don't try to view everything just from the lens of who you are and your. Look, act, and ideally be interested in the conversation. We like to engage. Observe nonverbal behavior. Pay attention to what somebody's body is telling you along with what their words are telling you, because they may not be the same thing. And when that happens, it may need, we need to probe a little bit to find out what's they're being silent about. Don't interrupt. For some of us, that's harder than for others, but let people say what they have to say without needing to jump in. Listen between the lines for what's not being said. Often there's a subtext that's quiet and that we may need to encourage people to tell us. Rephrase to ensure understanding, and I think I told you a story about that, which I won't. A French husband who uses the word outside differently than the word inside. But rephrase if you're not clear about what somebody's saying to you. And finally, stop talking. Right? So that's the first step. There's a couple of others. So there's some conditions that make it more successful when we're doing this kind of work. And the first is listening to everybody, not just to those who agree with you. We have a tendency to sort people into categories subconsciously, but those who have agreed with us more often than not. Pay attention to everybody. And understand that people process information and discussion at different rates and in different ways. So for those of you who are, or those of us who are introverts, right? It's like, stop talking so I can think about this and figure out what I believe. If you're an extrovert, you know what you do. You talk and you talk and you talk until you figure out what you think. That's how you figure out what you believe, right? So we don't all come at this the same way. So let's be cognizant of the fact that we have different styles. We're going to have some tight time frames in this meeting and in the meeting on the 20th. If Eric or Jesse or Michael or I say, you got 5 minutes, you got 5 minutes. Not 10, not 7, 5. Help us help you get through this work. We're going to try to seek common ground in action, and that can be a challenge in some of these places because we will often have a single voice that has a different perspective than the bulk of the group. We want to try to find the thing that the majority of us can agree upon more often than not. Let's not get too hung up on the fringes of issues. And be flexible. All of us may have causes or issues that we care passionately about. Figure out which ones are most important. Not everything rises to the same level of importance. And be patient. This process does take time. So if you're going to do that, you're going to need a little self-discipline, not a lot, just a little bit tonight. And that means suspend your natural inclination to immediately judge and sort. We all tend to do that. We hear the first part of a conversation. I don't agree with that. That's useless. I don't think I agree with that person. Try not to do. Try to listen to what people are saying. Promise to ask and to answer. Ask open questions designed to learn more about perspective and to answer honestly how you believe and how you respond. And finally, own your idea. That means instead of saying, well, I've heard from others, if it's really what you think, be willing to say, I believe, as opposed to, well, last time I was at the Driftwood Diner, I heard. Tell us what you believe. So that's the framing for how we're going to operate tonight. Eric's going to lead us through a discussion about the strategy, and then we're going to circle back to a conversation about the vision before we talk about it.
Right? And for the vision and strategy conversation, we are, I talk about setting time limits. We are going to be on a tight time frame for those, only because we have to get through the educational component of the land use and zoning and DPA tonight. We can always come back to the strategies if we need to, and vision if we need to. Hopefully, based on the results of the Survey Monkeys, we can build some good conversations off that. But again, we are going to be on tight frame for the discussion of the strategies and vision. Really quick before we get into that, this is just a friendly reminder. This was signed by each and every single one of you about ethics and conflict of interest. I'm not going to read this. We're all adults here. But if you have a conflict of interest or ethic or any type of potential questions, just remember you can be part of discussion. You may not be able to be, you won't be able to necessarily vote or be part of that consensus, reaching consensus decision, right? So just again, if you are take a look at this, feel free to review your procedure document you signed before you were even selected to be on the SAC. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us or the ethics board as well. Again, the point, as Kate mentioned, I won't go into too much detail, is we're here to really get a consensus, right? To make sure we can, to get to that middle point. What can make you comfortable enough to get to that middle point, if not more? And with that, that's going to help us be able to build a consensus as a group. You may not love everything, you may not like everything, but if you can, live with it, that's the kind of what we're trying to reach. So with that being said, so this is just one example of a breakdown of the Survey Monkeys you guys were all part of. Thank you again to those who submitted your responses. What we did, we looked at every single one of them, and anything that was basically the middle, right here, the disagree but trust the group, south, so I can live with it, I like it. Those are all part of that slide before, where we stand aside and move forward, right? So based on everything we saw and everything we passed back out to you in each of the categories, we have consensus on every strategy, but this is an opportunity for the SAC to decide if they want to pull one out or pull however many out and discuss about them individually. And Kate had the idea to pull them out and then vote on or come to a consensus on the ones that were not pulled out, so we can just kind of move on and go from piece to piece.
So it's kind of like a consent agenda you might use on another board. You look at the set. If there's something you want to talk about separately, you ask to have it pulled out. Then we accept the balance of it as a group. That will let us focus on the places we want to talk about and not spend time drilling down too far. That make sense, Bill?
So you're gonna weed out the ones that there's no, we don't have any problems with.
Well, actually, it's the reverse. You pull out the ones you have a problem with that you want to talk
Right.
about. And then we accept the rest as it's.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, okay. I'm only, my concern is, if some of these things go, I mean, obviously, if it's an overwhelming response to a certain question, I just don't want the way that some of the questions may have been stated to be misleading without a little bit of explanation from different people's points of view. And only if they were, what is it, needs discussion. I mean,
So we can look through, so each of the categories here, I have a link, I put the results that I sent out via email onto your Google Drive. We can click one open and we can show any particular breakdown of any particular strategy you guys would like to discuss. But again, based on all the data that was in those documents that we sent out to you, every strategy that you guys discussed via SurveyMonkey and in person already have reached a consensus according to the data that we have from you. So again, this is a time, if there's a particular strategy or particular section or something you guys want to talk about in more detail now that we haven't already done, that we may have done so already, but if you want to continue to do it, is now the time to pull that out, say, hey, I really want to talk about strategy number line 62 or whatever it may be, right? Now's the opportunity to do so, or give a specific strategy you have an issue with.
And I would, at the risk of opening a can of worms, I would say that there are places that people have made observations about something that's missing. So I'll use this as an example. Under public transit, the strategy to continue to explore innovative solutions to increase transportation options with the focus on serving low income and elderly, several people added and disabled. It's missing. So the question, Eric, is how do you want to deal with that? Do you want to automatically incorporate those kinds of suggestions, or do you need them to be discussed?
Yeah, so with comments like that, we as staff discuss that comment particularly, we are going to. So this is kind of where that fuzzy line between wordsmithing and group discussion, that's what we're kind of at right now with those comments. Now, but again, the point of this conversation is for the greater picture, right? Like, is there a strategy that has completely missed the mark or has missed so much that it's not even worth putting on here? Or is there, again, something that we've missed already that should be incorporated, right? That's the point of this kind of conversation.
Let's have that as a second conversation. What's missing?
Yeah.
Because there were some things in the suggestions and things that are missing.
So my read of the data is that, agreeing with you, there is consensus on these. So my suggestion is you just throw them up there and we see that there's data that says, here's one that needs more discussion, that we spent some time on it, but frankly, I didn't see a handful that had more than one dissent.
What are you gonna do with the wordsmithing? I mean, is that just gonna be either you all look at it and make a decision? We're not gonna discuss those at all?
So some of the wordsmith, our review of the comp plan, we still have to go through the office of law, we still have other agencies that can look at this. So they may have their input on it as well, but what we're gonna do is use what you guys have as that foundation for that review.
So we won't be talking about those tonight.
No, we can talk about any strategy that you guys have already answered tonight.
Can you give us an example of the level at which you're thinking?
Well, just one on development of new parks on the Mayo Peninsula. It said it should be limited, for example. And until, the Maryland 214 is approved. And so I just said it should be paused. I don't know what limited means. I mean, limited could be one new place or 40 houses. That's what I have the most problem with, is some of these words in here, like the word support, for example, is in different places. in some places it's articulated what that support is, and in other places it just says support. And there's no meat on those bones, so that's some of the problem I have.
This is my favorite, but let's just take, a specific one, right, so we can get concrete discussion, so the recommendation around, that was on parks, development of parks within Mayo Census, you mentioned houses. There's no, that's not about housing at all, it's about just saying, that, the development of parks, right now, there's a planning process for the development of the park.
Right, I'm
And that
sorry,
has to
I
be
was confused.
Limited
on that, but-
until the 214 improvements are. And I think that's something that's been discussed a lot in the Mayo community.
The plan going forward, they're planning for the future of the park, and some of those elements are gonna be instituted before 214 is done. So it's not being paused, it is being limited, it's being constrained. The size is being greatly constrained because of the infrastructure constraints. So I found the language on that to be just right for the park.
Yes, also, I think it's worth noting, obviously, members of the public need to understand what we're putting forth in these plans, but they're being implemented by the various county departments and agencies. So in this case, it's the word limiting and a little bit of question about that. In others cases, it might be, more of a technical term, and you might ask, well, can't we make that a little bit plainer? And sometimes we have to use specific language so that it's clear to the implementing agency what we're trying to lay out. So yeah, if you have wordsmithing questions like that, definitely bring them up, we can address them, but just know we can't change every little thing.
So let's start off like section by section. This is the natural environment. Anybody have any comments or questions, the ones that will pull out from the natural environment section? And we right now have pulled up the breakdown of your guys' responses to the Survey Monkey. So we can kind of see how everything broke down.
So I had a question about. So I've just broken my own rule about what's not there. And it may be incorporated elsewhere in 2040. So that's why it's not here. Then the question is whether we're missing strategies in support of protection and preservation of the forest canopy in South County. Is because it's in the. It could be in the open space. It's in plan 20. Right. Because it's in plan 2040, it doesn't need to be here, is that right? Correct.
And we do, not specifically, like you're gonna plan them, put it online. And we do mention these first ones about this conservation of urban open space. We don't specifically say forests, but I think that goes, kind of imply that a lot of that land conservation is gonna be forest plan. So I think that there are very explicit statements in plan 2040 that apply countywide, including Region 9, that specifically speak to forest canopy. And then this kind of is more specific to priority areas.
And does that incorporate forest and wetland?
Again, not explicitly, but I think that's implied.
I don't think you can imply something. I think if it's not written, it's not there.
Unless you can specifically point to where it is in the 2040.
Yeah, and the plan will reference, support for the plan 2040 conservation goals that have with the reference.
Because there's a bunch of, I'm gonna end my comments. There's a thread running through a lot of my comments that thread through more than just natural areas about say forested wetlands, and using the weather we've had this week as an example. It is becoming more of an issue, either with people's backyards flooding, or roads flooding, or stormwater management issues, nutrient load issues, and implying something isn't the same as stating the problem in the issue. And I think the way we're gonna work, I'm afraid we're gonna miss something if we just fly through these For the sake of time, but, well,
So the question is, in my mind, is if there's something that's particularly critical to South County,
particularly to low-lying areas of South.
then should we suggest a new strategy that addresses forested wetlands? Flag that to the staff and let them develop it and move on.
And we could comment on it, we could work on it on the side, that's fine, yeah.
Yeah, so what the point of what we have here is, again, is you guys have read these strategies a lot. You guys have done a lot of work with what has been presented to the Survey Monkeys. So what we're trying to do with the ones that we have in front of us now is to move on with those. Now, it doesn't mean just those, but we gotta figure out what to do with what we have. Now, if you guys don't want some, fine. We need to figure out what to do with this group that we have chilling right here, right?
But to that point too, if I can add real quick, if this study does mention permanent conservation of land, and at the end it says, you know, it talks about areas to prioritize like around our existing open spaces, and that in the final statement is locations most at risk to coastal flooding, sea level rise.
That's not coastal flooding. Forested wetlands and the coastal flooding.
Yeah. So they already, so I think we can work on crafting one. If you guys have an idea you want to put forward what that looks like. Because right
I think
now,
we're
in
gonna
my
have
mind,
to-
it's
I think we're gonna have to-
concerned that we're gonna end up having a strategy that says
Yeah.
conserve every ecosystem we can list.
Well,
So,
we have a couple
I'm
of
trying to understand where we
ecosystems,
want to go.
there are only a couple of ecosystems in that really stand out in this area. Okay, I mean, and whether it be buffer, you know, and everybody, and a couple of the other questions, it was always coastal, tidal, and what tidal wetlands. Well, we have a lot of forested wetlands that aren't getting, they're getting short shrift in the process at this moment and have been over the last 20 years.
So,
And
would the purpose be to create a new strategy or add to this, I talked about land conservation, to add in forested wetlands and stream buffers?
Under the natural environment, a new strategy that addresses that.
Okay.
And we'll need to think about what that is, but
Right.
it's an absence, but that's a problem down here.
Yeah, it's up on the mail as well.
And if we don't get it on there, then it's not accounting for the value, and they serve a great value, right?
Yeah.
And the next guy that comes along would say it has no value, therefore let's bring them on, right? And subdivide or whatever. But they do serve a great value.
For right now, that we do also have regulations in place that protect the whole flood side of that.
So what I hear is that we are agreeing to the 5 strategies that are under the natural environment land conservation. And adding one on forested wetlands, is that right?
Should we look at, I thought question 10 was the only other one that had,
And not in this category,
question 10 is the one,
not under land conservation.
okay, sorry.
I just said it for landscape.
Yeah, oh, no,
So then the next group is climate change, right?
I was gonna,
Oh,
on
yeah.
natural environment, I was gonna ask on question 25. It talks about the renewable energy. And I add, you know, you got my survey, so I don't know if you guys will, if there's wordsmithing and there's something that you can add in, or whether these have already incorporated those, or whether the wordsmithing is yet to come. On these, have we already wordsmithed these, or are these?
No,
yet to be- yet
what
to-
we're showing today is exactly what you guys responded.
Yet to be wordsmith. Okay, so most of what I have is wordsmithing, so I would be of mind to see what the next iteration is, and then if there's something that's substantial, I would comment, but on this 25, I was wondering whether we wanted to say something about prioritizing placement of the solar on land that is already developed, like landfills, parking lots, rooftops, et cetera, and focus on protecting the natural resources of farmland and forest. Just because I didn't feel like this covered that part of the conversation. And just, if that's a wordsmithing, or if that's more of a substantive type deal. So I just throw it out there.
Hamilton, where are you?
I hope I'm on the right thing. There it is, right there.
It's
Yeah.
a little different than what you're looking at, Katie. What you're looking at is the initial chart that we sent a couple weeks ago.
Okay, yeah.
But what the one he's talking about is the conduct study to evaluate potential for solar and other forms of renewable energy in Region 9.
Number 11.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, different word numbering.
Yeah.
But so what I'm,
Oh, I just need to clarify something. So I really want to make sure that we're focusing on not just solar, but other forms of renewable. And I think that's
Mhm.
somebody added that in on number 1 down there.
It's in 11 too.
It's in the,
Okay,
yeah.
I just want to make sure that, I mean, that,
That's right.
yes, we've talked solar specifically, but I just want to make sure that there's other forms. So right now, you have wind, you have other, but yeah.
so it sounds like we can pull out number 11. And we as staff can maybe work and come back to you guys later. But so let's, if that's what the group wants, we can pull out 11 and come back to you guys later. That. Is there any other?
Yeah, that's.
So that's all the climate change ones. There's 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 on climate change.
It's a number of different, I'm not being like this is number. But I agree, I made the next comment as far as being in the devil in the details, but I agree with what Hamilton said, as far as his comment, number 1, is prioritize the placement. I think it's gonna be a bigger deal further west, where there is a lot of open farmland.
Mhm.
And
Agreed.
they're right under the power line where
Yep.
we're not, but. You can't take, just because you think it won't be done as protection.
Well, you remember as an example, I think it was down in Charles County where they wanted to cut a bunch of trees down and put a solar farm in.
Yes.
You know, and everybody thought that was I think it was college or something that was, anyway. That's a good point.
So for the sake of this conversation, staff can pull out 11. We'll move on. And so is there any other from the natural environment that we have to pull out?
Keep going.
Okay, so
You wanna sit, is that consensus on that environment, then that's one we're pulled out? As a group,
minus number 11. Can the group agree with consensus for the remainder of the strategy?
Survey showed that.
They said.
So we can move on to the built environment, because wish for any other topic, we just kind of go down the line here. Is there any you guys wish to discuss about the built environment?
I feel like we should pull out section 7, reference 14, because that had a lot of,
So which strategy number is that?
I think it's in reference 14. That one had, 2 disagrees, but not, and then a couple standardized, some other stuff.
You might pull out 16 as well. Because the 15, 14, 15, and 16 has the
Yeah.
least consensus of anything in the responses.
So 14, 15, and 16, we can pull those out.
We accept the rest. And then come back and talk about that at the end.
Yes.
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 The healthy communities.
I'm sorry, I want to back up. I was looking at a subset. There is nothing in here about.
Which one are you?
Within the whole built environment.
Okay, go back to the.
There's nothing in there about the speed on the roads. Which is a huge issue there. I don't know what the strategy is, but people are dying left and right because of the uncontrolled speeds on Muddy Creek and Route.
Quite good.
I'm in. But somehow we need something that talks about that. It's a huge issue that I don't think will be silent.
I think that's a good point. I would agree with that.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
That's all.
But, I mean, they have to do with safety, doesn't it?
It has.
Yeah,
And,
that's-
I mean, you're not gonna get,
No, I was to say, Cindy Carrier, Office of Planning and Zoning. I agree with you. But it's an enforcement issue. And I want to get you to the right agency that can maybe work with you on some solutions. And so there is, forgetting which bureau it is, within DPW. So you threw out from. So they have solutions to those kinds of things, but it also depends on the way. And you would want to organize a community meeting and have them come out and talk about, and they probably have data on the accidents. And working with the police, department also to report stuff. But it's not really a planning issue. But I do agree with you that it is, you know.
Cause I know that when we were doing the traffic APF, they did have accident data that they can work off of to look for, you know. So in on lower speed streets, you can actually advocate for, what they call traffic calming, you know, the humps. But on some of the higher rated streets, that goes back to the enforcement. piece.
But
There's really
I
nothing.
will also say, I feel like it's sometimes tough, like being in an area, I used to be in an area where we were potential for the traffic calming, but I feel like it's very hard to get a large consensus to get it passed, because there were like enough people who were interested, but then it was like, because it wasn't being mandated, they kind of, it fell to the wayside.
So I want to turn this just a little bit, and I understand exactly what you're saying, Cindy, but I also want to comment about public perception about this plan. And I looked at it like the third time through to say, if I were a resident who had no background on what went on and read this plan, would I believe that I was heard on the issue there? And safety is probably the biggest issue there. The biggest one. So I don't know that we can put a planning solution in, but it feels to me like we ought to have a strategy that says, create a strategy to deal with the safety issues, whether that turns out to be public education, whether it turns out to be rumble strips, whether it turns out to be road redesign. I don't know what the solution is. But the absence of referencing safety here feels like an insult to the people of South County.
I agree.
So,
Yeah, a strategy to say.
Yeah, cause that's,
Again, the health of women.
yeah,
It's
'cause
part of,
yeah, cause it encompasses several departments.
right,
And you have to deal with like the different.
Well, and maybe
pieces
even
of
the
it.
state.
Yes,
The
Right.
state ones.
for the state of.
I would, if I may, just want to double and ditto, but on the fact of putting a strategy together, mentioning it as a group in our plans, and also to comment on enforcement. I just caution that we don't say, well, that's not our problem, and it's enforcement. I believe it's a deeper issue, and you mentioned it, and that is on the design of the road itself. It's unsafe at almost any speed sometimes. So it's not necessary, we're not saying stop the speeders, we're saying fix the roads. That's what I think.
That's what help you with either traffic calming measures, site design, you know. and it-
Shoulders,
Well,
Yeah,
no,
Vision Zero is gonna be a big proponent of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I would say also probably part of it is just to keep in mind if you look at like, coming back to like the built environment and that type of stuff, because, I mean, I would argue that a large part of it, I feel, is caused by road rage and people, and not having the appropriate roads and infrastructure to get people to and from where they're going to, so they're like, get out of my way and passing and doing stuff, and I mean, I get it. To a certain, I mean, it's not acceptable, but, and just to keep in mind as we talk about development, because that adds more traffic.
I agree with what you said, Kate. I think we would need to get and have the data in front of us. I believe a lot of the individuals who have been in accidents or who died are not from this area and are not used to the road. And so how do we address that as well? So I think we need the data to say who is involved in these accidents, etc.
So we can have a conversation with staff about speed, safety, and how we can incorporate that into Region 9.
And whether it's in built or healthy communities, I think there needs to be a link here. This is in that triangle around infrastructure and development and the environment. And, you know, the more we advance development, before we've got proper infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I'll say safety infrastructure. So if there's some way to make the connection here that the built environment needs to be based upon a healthy and safe infrastructure, which includes roads and
Agreed.
Water, sewer.
yeah, yeah.
Power.
All right, healthy communities.
I would make a small, hopefully not a wordsmith, but to the question 1545, to make sure that we implement whatever is decided with the Galesville Park, make sure that those same, design changes are maybe implemented in Deal Park, because we'll probably have a lot of the same issues for noise screening.
HC. Also, we're back to healthy community.
Yeah.
Which one?
Page
Number
15,
strategy
26.
45.
It's question 15.
So under, mid expand. Just
Just make sure that we're. Would you guys be looking at a study for the question 19, number 46, looking at the reception and the use of the Twin Beach Library? Even though it's not in our county?
100%, I just want to make sure that we close out the environment.
I know,
You know,
you're right.
He wasn't that.
Yeah, so can we say as a group, we pulled out a couple of those environments and walk through, can read it out again. There was nothing to add, but then the rest of them were in agreement.
Yes.
Agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't matter. It's like,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So your question was about a library.
Yes, the library one, just, maybe a note just to look at, the Twin Beach one, which I think is almost done.
Can you say a little louder?
Oh,
Sorry.
since the Twin Beach one is almost done, maybe that we would look at that, the youth and how that one's being received in the community. And maybe model some of that, because they're a similar community. Twin Beach, I don't know,
What is
the
the
Twin
It's,
Beach Library.
Calvert County.
Calvert County, it's like right North Beach, they just,
Brand
they're
new.
almost done
Opening
rebuilding.
up next week, I think.
A brand new building.
Really nice.
They just
very
redid
modern
their
building.
library.
So your thought was that, we could learn from their usage patterns and apply it to,
And
So what-
design and music,
and apply it.
it's a pretty similar community that's like 20 minutes away.
Except they've got a lot more money.
I said that's a great idea, but it might be a little bit too specific and directed to the agencies. So, yeah, we might then lean back and say, well, I saw a great library here or there. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So healthy community,
It's true.
healthy environment,
Other
the community, trying to figure out what is library.
On something 25, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but, if we were to add something, we're talking about, locally grown food. Create more opportunity to make locally grown food available to local communities such as farmers markets and in schools. Does it make sense to add preserve or protect and preserve farmland into that particular, thing, or is it mixing apples and
And
oranges?
this is where we have the relationship between the different strategies, so there's that preservation one for folks in the national. Land.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
Question. I think it's 21 and the reference 47. I'm following that. Okay. Consider partnering with local nonprofits to design, coordinate, and promote youth summer programs at Region 9 community centers. I just thought that youth programs wouldn't have to be limited to community centers. It could be in churches, it could be in our local Galesville Memorial Hall, for example. I mean, it doesn't have to just be in a Region 9 community center. You had it capitalized, so I didn't know if that meant
Yeah,
like
that's
our
something we want to
specific.
make sure we're giving direction to the county government. Nonprofits will do what they'll do outside this plan. So I think, what do you want the county Department of Aging and Disabilities that manages those community centers to be doing?
Not restricted.
Yeah, we're not saying anybody else can't do it, right? We're kind of making the government a little more accountable.
Okay, thank you.
Any others in the healthy communities? Safe to say we've all reached consensus.
Yes.
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 And then to wrap up the strategies, we have the healthy economy.
Question number 6, which deals with, it's reference 51. Implement strategies to address parking needs during events and busiest times of the year in Mayo and Galesville and Deal. And we have a parking problem. It's not just the busiest times of the year. I just didn't want to limit it to when their events are the busiest times. I mean, we just have a general overall parking problem. And when I spoke to some businesses last week, I mean, that's their biggest issue is parking. And
Carol.
so I would
Kathy, what part of
suggest
the county?
wordsmithing.
I'm sorry, what part of the county?
Galesville. So I
think
just suggested some wordsmithing.
Just simply said address parking needs. I think that could, like, if we want to talk about applying, could apply throughout the entire year, regardless of peak or not.
Right.
We do get several public comments when you drop a public review, of people saying, hey, this is really an issue when there's something going on. Don't build those parking lots in places like down the street here. You know,
Well, I think, yeah, it just depends where it is. I just think in Galesville, it's not just limited to when we have an event or.
Same with the Mayor Road corridor.
Okay, so we can wordsmith, we can figure that out, but we can have a solution.
Okay, thank you.
The, it's just a flag. Within this area, we have been defining Deal as the Rockville Creek Bridge to the community center. What community? The one that's gonna be built right down here.
You mean, the park, the park?
That's what we've defined Deal in?
That's how we've defined it in here in terms of sidewalks.
the village center,
The village center starts from the bridge down past the library, down to the next lot, right? But there's a lot that's on the other side of the bridge. So it feels to me like that's too narrow a definition. If we're thinking about improving the facade of the community, creating sidewalks. People are walking on the other side of the bridge to Happy Harbor, down to your marina. Now, there's a lot going on
I
down
think
there.
we agree that actually has come up before. The Hamilton brought that up too in previous meetings. And it actually is going to come up in the second part of this meeting. We have to look at that map of where we define that development policy area. If you want to drag that across the other side of the bridge, we can talk about that. And I think
Not to be a wordsmith, but it seems like there was some talk about maybe on question 13, 54, making sure that we separate, the marine trades and the agriculture into 2 separate, pieces. Make sure that we get a weight that they need.
question, Jane?
Strategy 54. I'd take that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think agriculture should.
Here, we just split that.
But isn't marine agriculture? I mean, clamming and oystering and. There,
Well, marine.
it's all aquaculture now, it's part of the agriculture. Program, I would
Agriculture is
think.
not part of the commercial fishing industry. They're two totally separate.
It falls under regulation under the farming agriculture.
The way the state has moved aquaculture into the agriculture
Right.
to be policed. They're two totally different things, commercial fishing and aquaculture.
Would it be appropriate to ask staff to look at this and see if it ought to be divided
Yeah,
to reflect that distinction?
I understand that difference, I understand what you're saying. However, I've seen and heard that a lot of folks want to go into the agriculture or the water, oysters primarily. And there's not a lot of places for that to fall into. I didn't know if this could be a start to give it some definition and a little more start. I don't
Well,
know.
it's also
I
a
just throw
state-
that out there.
It's a state managed thing and not a county managed process.
Right, I understand it's managed.
The state manager?
not
Yeah,
necessarily
we think
well sometimes, but it's
agriculture.
managed.
Aquacultural businesses, and then, but I still think like the agricultural is separate from the marine trade training, because that's more, I would think, referring to like boat mechanics and that type of.
Right. Historical, right?
Yeah, which,
So we can work out, because we have a couple others to work with, and we still haven't mentioned, but. So we can, there's be some work on the staff, and we can come back to you guys on it.
I think the next question, if mine is right, says there's a need for training in marine trades. Cool.
I think that's the same one.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're
Okay.
talking about.
Oh,
see, we're looking at it.
I think we have different-
So they grouped it together.
Okay.
Even I'm trying to follow you.
Just for educational purposes, and forgive my ignorance, who is Resilience Authority? And how have we decided that they are the body to manage so much of what we have here?
Yeah, so, the Resilience Authority is a entity that was established by the city of Annapolis and Arundel County, with the doc budget was up in 2021, and it was set up in 2022 with the express purpose of new funding, new capabilities to be able to, fund, climate-resistant infrastructure. So they have been, last year, they garnered about $23 million in federal funding to help support ongoing projects, and
Okay.
now moving into implementation.
Thank you.
Given that minus the two, 51 and 54, can we, agree that there's a consensus on healthy comp?
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
All right, so we have just over 10 minutes left, 11 minutes and 8 seconds. to be exact. I'm gonna pass something out. This is about the vision, Katie.
You want to go back, the housing ones that got pulled out?
Absolutely.
Let's deal with that and we'll deal with this on the 20th.
Sound good. We're most likely May.
Whatever.
Eric, the comments that were made in the ones that we haven't talked about, I mean, is that something that gets taken into consideration somehow down the road or what?
So the comments, so if we came to a consensus, if the group came to a consensus on some of that comments, we're still gonna evaluate the comments, just because the group came to a consensus now, there may be a good comment there that we as staff will incorporate into like the disability for the.
Okay.
So we're, again, your guys' job is to tell us like, this is we're heading in a good direction, we're doing the work. We're putting the work down, we just need big ideas.
I'm sorry, I just have one comment on question 15, number 55. I just got feedback that the problem with permitting goes beyond just hiring a person to navigate through the permitting process, that there are big problems with the permitting process, and that this should be addressed, so broadening this element to include, like, conduct a study on the permitting process to identify issues and implement changes to address the issue. I mean, somebody, like they waited a year to get permit, they don't get feedback. I mean, it was just, one person kind of, I thought that's the point, that it's just not hiring a person.
Yeah.
There might be more problems with the process of one
Absolutely right.
person.
And that's a bigger issue than Route 9 in general. So this is specifically pointing at kind of the maritime space and the difficulties of permitting the bulkheads and piers in the water. You have county, state, federal jurisdictions. And there's strategies in 10-20-40 that point to the need to streamline permitting kind of countywide. When you think about your regular kind of residential or commercial development permit, there's strategies that apply countywide or even that in 10-20-40. And I acknowledge that issue, but it's a lot bigger than this. So there's just kind of one specific thing that can be helpful to the marine industry to make sure that we've got point people, so that way this particularly complicated permitting set where you have multiple jurisdictions with competing authorities, competing demands, that you have someone to help navigate that.
Are we gonna be, I'm assuming we're gonna get into it pretty heavy, when it comes to some of these requests, for zoning changes in how the process works. If things were changed and from one zoning to another,
Yeah.
it may change the success rate of what that person is trying to get.
Yeah, that'll be the heart of a lot of the discussion on the zoning changes, is what could they do if they got this zoning? And then that's why we've got experts like Joan here to help kind of get into the depth of what is allowed and not allowed in different zoning districts. So yeah,
Okay.
we'll get into a lot of discussion about each of that.
You want to circle back to the three housing ones,
Yeah.
which are 14, 15, and 16?
This is about our missing middle and diverse housing.
Right. This is where we had the least amount of agreement.
It's a complex issue. Certainly, the public comments also have diversity opinions on these. We have some folks who would stand up and say, hey, affordable housing is the key thing. And I'm supportive of, especially as you guys have kind of, this group's discussion, talk about limiting that future development, kind of focus it into those areas that already have development, that have opportunities to be close to commercial areas or other services. Limiting it overall, but then where we put it in those focus areas. And these strategies speak of saying, trying to change the county code and policies that way, that housing be more diverse. So it's not all just, as you have commented before, like the new $1 million mansion, that we're seeing more diverse housing types, more affordable or different ages and stages of life.
One thing I think on this one, I did comment on this, and my one thought was that, on, the part where it talks about the, I was missing now, but where is it? Is that my thing on here?
Can you bring it back? up? So, yeah.
I said take out Galesville.
Yeah.
Because it's on a peninsula, and that was just kind of being consistent with the peninsula thought process of the different peninsulas. We weren't trying to put too much housing on the peninsulas. It's a one way in, one way out. It's a small peninsula, but nonetheless peninsula. So that was a comment.
The reason Galesville is in there, just the kind of clarification, is because Galesville is a village center,
Right.
and that's why. it's
Understood.
village,
Understood. Thank you. That was my comment. I don't know if
Sure.
that makes sense or not, but that was what I
I
thought.
agree, the feedback I've gotten is take out here.
Of course you did.
Take it out as being,
Not a place for affordable housing.
Not explored.
well.
Yeah,
Audrey,
I just wanted to, I did call and talk with, I feel like we're missing the people who would be taking advantage of a lot of the middle housing in our polling, and.
Correct.
And we're just not reaching them, from, like a my age level and like a little bit younger, and, I would also say the diversity might not be there that we need, and when sometimes I've been talking to people anecdotally, just running into somebody and asking them what their feelings are on that, they might not have the feelings that we're currently seeing reflected. And then, so I don't know how we get those people to respond, because they're kind of like, why does this matter to me? But I'm like, and they don't.
I respond to that in a moment, but here we go.
So this question specifically is talking about missing middle housing, and when you say affordable housing has is more about like subsidize, helping people be able to afford housing. To me, this is talking about different, like building different kinds of homes, different sizes and different, and like scale, at which it's at small scale, missing middle housing, and no builder is building this. And nobody who is tearing down an existing house is building to the same scale usually that it was. So we are losing our smaller houses in our area, the cottages. Yes, there will be some people that renovate them, but they're older, and most people are tearing them down and building the biggest thing that is feasible on that lot. And it is a problem, because it doesn't even have to be, you can have a good job and have a lot of advantages and still have trouble affording a McMansion. If there were some houses that were smaller in scale, then the first, a first-time home buyer, a family, people that are younger, or people that want to downsize would have options, and that we are missing that in this area.
And I do agree and hear what you're saying, but I also feel like, we don't just have to look at dividing lots as the solution. I just want to make sure that we're considering
Agreed.
other options, such as zoning height restrictions, stuff like that, when we're talking.
Yeah.
But I would still think we're missing. Sure.
On the diversity question, I'll note, we wrote this into the summary post feedback on these draft strategies, that a couple of us got to attend the annual brunch for the Ralph Bunch Center. And we talked about 35 individuals there, all presented Black African American, and they had through the roof support for looking at these different housing options. And that included conversations with folks who said, yeah, I lived actually particularly in Galesville, I couldn't afford there anymore, now I'm living in Prince George's County. And saying that I would love it if this kind of housing was available in this area again, so I can move back home.
This topic here runs headlong into built environment, natural environment, traffic issues. I don't think you can't build 20 extra units at the end of Shady Side and not have an effect somewhere on people's safety or the environment. And that is just one issue. The other issue that you run right into is just the pure economics of building some kind of either middle housing or affordable housing. The folks that we presented us information at the last meeting, I mean, granted, they were big time builders, but even a small builder is not going they're going to maximize their investment on a piece of property. And you can't tell them, no, you can't maximize it because you have to sell it for a certain price. That's just it's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to tell somebody they can't sell their property at market value or build a house on it for market value. And the reason we are running into this, particularly on peninsulas, is like the folks said last time, we're running out of buildable land. Now, if we want to forego some of the things that we're working towards, we can take this issue up all day long, but I personally, we're beating a dead horse. We don't have a bunch of empty buildings in this region. We don't have a lot of empty houses in this region because they're being bought up because it's economically makes sense for people to buy them, sell them and make money on them.
That and
So I'm just looking at the language here, and it's talking about explore the potential. It's not saying it has to be done. And, it's not saying if builders don't find it economically feasible, they won't. But, and I think, we can have this debate, but I think Mayo ought to be up there as well. Certainly for missing middle. Mayo wouldn't be as interested in the village center, but certainly for missing middle housing, Mayo ought to be right in there with these other communities.
Yeah.
Particularly when we're talking about redeveloping existing commercial
Yes.
space.
Yes,
Well, yeah, I think the pre-existing and commercial development, I think, to me, to protect the peninsula overlay makes it obvious that those would not be the places that this type of housing would go. And I don't know, I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to tell someone that they can only sell something for a certain amount of money. I don't know how you accomplish this exactly, but having people be able to build like to a maximum size would be one way of controlling costs without telling somebody what dollar amount they can put on it or percentage.
let me be clear about these things. What this is saying is, we said, study it, and then look at the zoning, because right now you can't build these cottage courts that we looked at, and people thought they liked. You can't build it in Green County code. You could change the code to allow it, so that if the property owner is willing, if it financially makes sense for them, they have the opportunity to do it. Right now, they do not have the opportunity to do it, because the code doesn't allow. That's all I'm saying, is that it.
Yeah.
Creating opportunity for more housing, doesn't say there should be more housing or less housing, just the kind of housing can be built, can it be more diverse?
Is that only why that kind of housing is not able to be done, only why?
You promote this kind of like a cottage court. You can't, I guess theoretically, you could take the highest level density in the county and build that, but that'd be like in smack dab in the middle of the roll, and you just wouldn't. But generally, these kind of housing, these duplexes, triplexes, with cottage courts are not gonna be allowed in almost every zone.
So that is the time we allocated for this conversation. We've heard a lot of good things. It sounds like we've been able to move on from a lot, or with a lot. And it also sounds like staff has some little more work to do on some of these. We can come back to you likely in May. April 20th is going to be dedicated solely to land use, zoning, DPA. We'll talk more about that here in a minute.
So I want to ask you to do one thing. We're not going to have the conversation. But one of the things we did was take a look at all the feedback on the vision and create a chart that showed not the language, but the key elements. And I'm gonna ask Eric to tap that out and just ask you to look at it before we won't talk about the vision tonight. I know we had differing opinions of what a vision statement should be, how it should be crafted, what the language should be future focused, should be present tense. When we talk about vision, we're gonna ask us to talk about concept, not language. And agree on what it is we want the future to look like in terms of what are the elements that need to be. And back away from the, I wouldn't write it this way. And come to some agreement about what the content is. Because we can spend all the time we have left talking about, I would write it differently than you would write it. And I want it to be one sentence, and you want it to be a vivid description that's a paragraph or a page long. So when we go to the vision conversation, the issue is going to be what are the elements we want present in Region 9 when we've completed this plan. Okay. So we're going to do that. Tonight we have a vegetarian. We have one that has pepperoni, sausage, bacon, and mushrooms.
That's right.
We have one that is just pepperoni.
Hey, meet you, come from. Pretty good.
So while you guys were enjoying pizza, I just now have some two pieces of paper. We'll expand those more to become to the slides, but essentially it's gonna be a pretty cool graphic for you guys to have regarding what maybe a little more information on what land use is, what zoning is, and what's kind of what we call consistent. And we'll talk about more than here, but definitely take a look at those as we move on. So what is planned land use and zoning and development policy here, right? So there are three big pieces of this cake, onion, whatever you want to call it, right? First, we start more, what encompasses the most? Development policy here. And essentially what that is, it's just, it broadly identifies areas of the county suitable for different types of assets. We'll be specific, we'll provide specific examples soon. But, and we'll give a breakdown of specific development policy areas that are unread. But essentially, that's the first kind of foundation for what areas of the county what we will have. And that sets the foundation for the land use. The land use is a little more specific, right? So you'll have a commercial land use, you'll have low density land use, you'll have maritime land use. There's a whole bunch on the chart in front of you. And that kind of hones it in, right? Hones it in, focuses a little more of what this specific area is going to look like, what this little specific couple parcels, what they can do, generally speaking, and what the design is for this specific area. And then zoning goes on top of the land use. The zoning is ultra specific. That's where there's going to be differences between commercial 1, C2, C3, C4. All of them are commercial zonings. All those fit in the commercial land use, but each one potentially has a different type of use allowed in it. And so think of it like that, right? Think of it kind of like breaking down or building up to a pyramid or however you want to think about it, but it goes broad, a little more specific, and then ultra specific. So in region 9, there are 4 development policy areas: rural and agricultural, peninsula, neighborhood preservation, and critical corridor. And these definitions here are taken directly from Plan 2040. So you guys always have access to them. So feel free to pull that up. But each one has a specific goal and idea in mind, right? So for example, rural and agricultural, these like the first couple lines, the communities are characterized by large lots of residential areas, farms, and very limited commercial and industrial areas outside of the priority funding area, the PFA. And then again, the peninsula area, primarily residential communities that are surrounded by water, served by a primary road, located both within and outside the PFA, and primarily limited to infill and redevelopment, must be compatible with the existing character of the neighborhood. Critical corridor.
Can I ask a question? Priority funding area is identified in the GDP. And does this mean these are geographies where the county is committing? No, this is a state designation. I thought it was a state designation.
I can take that and then Sydney and Christine, I can embellish. But yeah, so in the state of Maryland, kind of big picture land policy, the state has its authority land use article that gives the authorization and the authority to counties and local governments to conduct these comprehensive plans and to give us some mandates. One of those is the idea of the smart growth principles in the state that you establish a priority funding area. And those words are chosen very particularly. Basically, this says this is where you want to put your infrastructure, and where the state kind of prioritize its funding of public infrastructure. So that's kind of formula based on density, where you have existing and planned sewer service. And so that is a relatively broad designation over the county. We can show you a map of that later if we want to see it. But the name can be kind of confusing because people often take it as a growth area. Doesn't mean that that area is gonna be like, not, parole has its own different kind of designation. Town center, that's a county designation. And we want to see that kind of higher intensity development in parole. The priority funding area is broader, it's areas characterized largely by where there's sewer. But extends beyond some of that and some of this.
So in region 9, the priority funding areas are, I know Mayo is one,
Yeah, we can show you a map later.
that'd be great. Thanks.
The
Thank
point of the very funny area is that by state law, state grant funds are tied to it. So if you want to try to, do a sewer plant or extend a sewer line, and if you cross that priority funding area, you're outside of it, the state's gonna say, we can't fund you there. So, what is it? We have that public infrastructure that we need to support for. That's where you want to have that priority funding area.
Thank you.
So, the other two, development policy areas, or DPA as I'll refer to in the future, in Region 9 is the critical corridor and the neighborhood preservation. The critical corridor is essentially, think about Edgewater, because that's the only area in Region 9 that is a critical corridor, right? It's commercial. I think major roadways, existing, commercial, have the opportunity to improve safety, walkability, all that kind of stuff. Neighborhood preservation covers a lot of the county, or a lot of the county, and that's existing residential communities. Neighborhood preservation can have commercial, it can have different industrial, all that kind of good stuff too. But again, it's more of the existing residential communities in natural areas. That are intended for substantial, that are not intended for substantial growth or land use.
I'm sorry, did you say that these 4 are the only 4 that are in region 9? Okay, thank you.
So, and then we do have village center designations. We talked about this briefly before. There are more than just 2, but this is all we kind of put on the screen right now, but, so again, the village center overlays are existing or planned, walkable, pedestrian oriented type areas, a mix of uses. And again, making sure that the areas are compatible with the character of the area. So that's why we broke down, as mentioned in one of the previous meetings, that there is a village center overlay, but not all village centers are the same. There are historic village centers, there are different types of village. And so one of your sheets you have is what's showing on the right-hand portion of the screen. It's the definition and more information about each type of land. This can also be found again on 10.40. And again, this is what helps guide the zoning. So the DPA sets that foundation, but the land use is really going to help focus in on to decide what kind of zoning is there. And I would encourage you all to take a look at this and kind of understand maybe a little more of what kind of land use is or what each land use is goal, what the goal for each land use is, right? So like commercial is obviously going to be more commercial, but the low density and low medium density residentials are going to allow different types of density in those areas. The other sheet you have is essentially a compatibility document in a sense. You're going to be able to see which land use goes with different zoning categories. This is very important as well because state law requires land use and zoning to be consistent. And one of our tasks that we've done, and Jesse will talk about this here in a few minutes, is we did a consistency analysis to make sure we in the Region 9 South County, we are being consistent with the land use and zone. You don't want to have you can't have a commercial lot on with land use of residential. Right? You want a commercial zoning for commercial land use. So to kind of give a specific example, here is Edgewater. It has the critical area corridor, sorry. So again, critical corridor is designed to be more commercial related and be along major roadways. And then in the middle, you can see the planned land use. The red is the commercial. So again, the commercial land use, there is that gray, which is transit, which is the airport. And then you have some low density residential, and you have some low medium density residential in orange. So then you look at the third section, that's the zoning. So you can kind of see where the red and red matches up, right? That's the best example, and one of the most easiest to understand how zoning and land use kind of align, is to see where the red and the red align. Now, different designations of zoning have different colors. So I believe red is C3, and there's like this purplish color, that's C4, that's still commercial. So that is just showing that it aligns with the commercial land use.
So is that purple on the third picture on the bottom right, or bottom left of the data, right there, that purple?
Yes, so that matches right with this.
Okay.
That's the Safeway. and,
Safeway.
Shopping center.
Okay.
And Ace Hardware, yep.
So then if we take a look at right here, this area, this kind of tannish khaki color. This is low density residential. Over here, we have R1 and R2 zoning, which aligns with the low density residential.
When you did the comparison land use to zoning for Region 9, how close was it or how out of whack was it?
Yeah, we'll get into that here in a little bit. So, and then, there were some areas that we needed consistent. We are recommending changes based on it.
Speaking of recommending changes, you had the Shady Side Peninsula chart up there a minute ago. And what you have as far as the tan color up there, as far as low density and even parts of the running up into the tan is actually, there's an open space designation in some of those there. Actually, it's the dark green, I guess. But one thing that's not on there that has an effect on this map, that's not, that we've experienced with Mayo, is your planned sewer lines. And planned sewer lines, they may have been something that was put on the books and planned for 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But in some areas, I do not think that they have actually been updated to modern times. And it's somehow that has to be overlaid there, and where sewer has not been built and it's going into low density neighborhoods or open space even, there is a big conflict.
Yeah, so when we start talking about the zoning aspect and specific areas or properties or whatever you may have, we can pull that up on a map and show you guys in a live time. I can drive around the map, we can pull up different layers, and that's gonna be a lot of the April 20th meeting, because if you want to see something specific, you can pull it up, we can show you this area does or does not have certain things, and then you guys as a group can base your conversation and decision or consensus around it.
Because that should also have the master sewer plan overlay on it, right?
Yeah, we have, there are layers we have with water, sewer.
Yeah. That'll answer some of those.
Yeah. We may not get too heavy into that tonight, but that will be more clear.
Yeah, yeah.
So another example, again, the Shady Side area, you have your, it says neighborhood preservation, but that is definitely peninsula, I apologize. So with that, again, keeping in mind that these are existing built communities, not intended for additional density. So you look at the land use map, you can see the low density residential in the khaki color. You see some open space in the green, as well as some small little commercial and other public use areas as well, and maybe a little maritime as well. So as you can kind of see, each DPA can encompass a lot of different type of land uses, right? DPA doesn't necessarily restrict any type of use. It just kind of helps focus in what future land uses, what future recommendations could and should be. Right? Does that make sense to everybody? So with that, the land use kind of then dictates the zoning. So you can see since there was a lot of low density residential, low density residential zoning. Lots of parks and open space, open space and conservation zoning. I agree. Are there any questions so far? Does this kind of I'm trying to be as clear as possible. Sometimes I get mumbled in the jargon, right? So. And then finally, another example, we have down here, a little farther south. The green is the rural and agricultural, and the tan, khaki, whatever color you want to call it, the neighborhood preservation. The land use, what matches along the line, or what matches the rural and agricultural is rural land use, and then low density residential, typically, with a little bit of maritime, matches the neighborhood preservation, and then again, the zoning, it goes to R8 zoning, which matches the rural, the R1 and R2 zoning, and which matches the low density residential. And to kind of help is I would take a look at this colorful page you guys have. It kind of gives a pretty cool understanding of what types of zoning is compatible and consistent with the land. Yeah, this is, I believe, part of.
That's deals.
That
Yeah,
area.
kind of where you go.
Okay.
So to move on, if there's no questions. We just kind of want to give you guys a little bit of a Q&A, make sure I explain it right, make sure you guys can understand my voice giving out a little bit. So we have examples of LVR, some commercial land use and some maritime. So what could be an example of a zoning category that would fit one or all of these? Anybody can spit it out, raise your hand, whatever you're doing. Yeah, so it's zoning, this is land use, so what zoning category would fit into one of these land use?
R1 or
R1.
Perfect. What about the maritime?
MA1 or 3?
MB, MC.
C2.
Commercial?
Yeah, C2.
Perfect, that's absolutely, all that's correct, and this is what is currently here, right? So, I did hear R2, MC, and C1, so. You guys are getting it. Make sure you're getting it, let's try one more. So, we have, low density residential, commercial, rural, and parks and open space. So based on the chart you have in front of you, what would be a good zoning for some of these categories?
RA.
C2.
So the parks and open space may be a little tricky, right? But other than that, you guys hit around on the head. And I'm not gonna quiz you more, we're all adults here, I don't wanna make anybody feel like we're at school again, right? We've gone past that.
I do have one question, and I asked you this a couple months back. What, and I was reading it in here, and it's kind of vague in here. There's a couple of descriptions that would be vague. Open space.
We'll dig into that more in just a minute. Yeah, we got some very specific examples we'll show you, because it's hard to talk about the abstract.
Okay.
And as you guys know, if you look at public use, when you guys start doing your reviews of these applications, and even as a consistency layer, you're gonna see areas of public use. Those are essentially allowed in impact. Same thing with transit, the zoning, I mean. There are some that kind of go against the rule, but typically a lot of these fit to generalize.
Just a quick question. Do we care if we've got parks and open space and land use, but not on the zoning side?
We'll talk about that in just a minute.
Thank you.
Good catch.
So before I pass it over to Jesse and talk a little bit more about some of these changes, I wanted to give you guys an understanding of the process, the comprehensive zoning process, right? But you guys are about to hit it hard and be real deep into it.
Y'all need to pay us.
Breakfast on the 20th.
So there are essentially two parts. One is the consistency review, we'll talk more about. But we look at the adopted plan land use and the DPA, and we see what the zoning is. And the reason we look at the adopted plan land use and DPA, for this specifically now, is because it just got vetted, it just got passed, it's got scrutinized to 5.4, right? That just happened. So we're gonna build off of what just happened. And this part comes in where you guys are gonna focus in on the zone. So we as staff looked at the land use, looked at the current adopted zoning. And saw if there's any inconsistency. If there was, we potentially recommended a change. Either or we recommended a change to match, to make it consistent. On the other side of this, we have the comprehensive review of the whole Region 9. So we looked at the owner applications that came in, which you guys are gonna be able to do as well. And you guys are gonna be able to also just look generally and look at the different areas of Region 9 to see if you believe there's something missing there from a comprehensive standpoint. Because we are supposed to be looking at what's good for is there a public need that's needed? Is there a benefit that we can do that help, that zoning can help make sure the county offers in these areas? So again, when we have these conversations and we have this, it's really important to think about things we've talked about before. Elder housing, childcare, community centers, stuff that's very important, and potentially consider recommendations that would allow for those kinds of uses into different parts of the region. And with all that, with the conversation that's happening, the land use may be fine, and we can recommend a zoning change, or we may have to change the plan, or recommend to change the plan land use in the UPA to help achieve these goals. And one other thing I want to point out and make very aware is everything that you guys do as a group, just like everything staff is doing and it has done, are only recommendations. The final authority to all of this is the county council. So again, this is why it's very important for each of us to stay involved throughout the entire process, because if we do all this good work now, we need to show this, we need to help have that support and get the council, because at the end of the day, council can do whatever they like.
Eric, remind me the target for council adoption of Region 9,
We're hoping about this time next year.
so after the election.
No, not the federal election.
County.
Yes.
So I'm gonna pass
Before we
it.
have Jesse, I'm gonna take two quick additions to this. In a comparison of like development policy area, plan land use and zoning, it's really important to know that zoning is where the county code, the law is. So the development policy area, plan land use, that's policy guidance that gets adopted in the general development plan. But then the zoning is, when the developer comes in with his application, they're gonna judge, does it meet the letter of the law in the zoning code? So it's important that the threshold across there. And just to relieve the attention, like Eric said, if we think about these zoning applications, the things that are coming in, think about all the strategies that we've talked about, the needs. We've heard loud and clear, and you can see from the policy areas that a lot of this area is peninsula policy area, as the description said. Office planning is always not encouraging a lot more development growth there. So as we talk about these changes, you're not gonna see office planning and zoning with, saying, oh, we're gonna have, huge changes here that are gonna increase the density and development. Like, well, you'll see specific changes, but they're gonna be mostly subtle, kind of as we talked about, that this area isn't intended for huge change.
All right, so we're in the comprehensive zoning process. And a piece of this is what we call consistency changes. So, as was previously mentioned in Plan 2040, which was adopted in 2021, they did a lot of analysis, a lot of on the ground vetting, a lot of looking at records and what is there and what do we need for the future. And so they developed the planned land use, and this was adopted by county council. And so now staff is taking the planned land use that's relatively recently adopted and looking at the current zoning and seeing for where it is consistent. Where does it kind of match? That was that exercise we just did with, if it was red planned land use, do you see kind of like reddish shades of zoning? So really we're looking a lot at table 17, like you guys kind of just did a little bit with what's the planned land use and what's the zoning to make sure they're consistent. And so areas where we're seeing that the zoning isn't consistent, we're recommending a change in what we call a consistency change. So a great example of that is what Matt pointed out. We had that planned land use map up. You could see the parks and open space planned land use. And you could see that there was some other zoning that was not open space or what's listed in table 17 as being the most compatible or consistent as the zoning. So in that case, staff would analyze those parcels and determine if the zoning should be recommended to be changed to something like open space to match that plan land use. Other times that you see this is, if a neighborhood is mainly zoned R5 and it's right next to something like a commercial business, but it's a house, somebody's house is there, it's mainly R5. It's operated as a house for however long, and that person plans to continue living there. And the planned land use is low, medium density residential. Staff would analyze and potentially offer a recommendation to change the zoning for that parcel to entirely R5 zoning, as it's a house, it's consistent with the planned land use, it's consistent with the community, so on and so forth. So those things where we're just kind of matching to what the recently adopted plan land use is, that's a consistency.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when you're talking a little bit about downzoning in that example, right?
Potentially.
From R5 to R1. So should we be thinking also that taxpayers been paying taxes on R5 property for 25 years? And if it's downzoned, is that going to change? I'm trying to see the benefit, the upside, so that taxpayer landowner gets maximum use out of this property that he's been paying taxes on for maybe decades. Should we be thinking that also, probably?
Let me give it a try, and then ask Cindy or Christina to chime in. You're hearing a lot of like the college perspective. Also, of course, you think about the property owners, right? This is, we mentioned how the state, law authorizes counties to do this. There's also the Constitution that enshrines private property right? And no, I have takings without compensation to landowners. So as you're going to balance and having thoughts about, property owners' rights and those kind of obligations, as well as what's best for public policy. Then on the tax piece in particular, Cindy or Christina want to comment on that?
Well, so we're currently going through comprehensive zoning with, regions 2 and 7 of county council right now. And there are property owners that have asked questions about tax assessment, which is handled by the Maryland Department of Assessment and Taxation. It's not Anne Arundel County. So generally, like differences between R1 and R5 are not going to result in changes for tax status because it's residential. If you jump though from residential to commercial, you're probably going to get impacted. Also, if there's currently open space zoning and we're recommending eliminating open space zoning, that's another place where there can be an impact. However, I don't work for the State Department of Assessment and Taxation, so specific questions really need to be directed to them.
Okay, well, I would like to make one comment on your statement. I was a state tax assessor. And I will tell you firmly. From it's been quite a few years, but when property is downzoned, taxes never change. And the county's not going to come out and ask that those taxes be changed. It has to be a real aggressive, knowledgeable taxpayer, landowner, to try to make those changes. And it's very, very difficult. So I just to make that clear.
Well, and that's, I think so really our Office of Law asks the questions of the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. But my understanding is that in general, like residential, you've got one house on the property. If it's R1, it's R5, even maybe R10, you're not going to see changes in taxes. Now, they did tell us like R15, R22, which are much higher density residential, those are almost evaluated at like a commercial level. So, I mean, it will come up, it's come up at council already,
Sure.
So it is something you can think about, just like, there was question about, well, where is sewer planned or not planned? This is a multi-level, we've got a lot of pieces and parts, it's a three-dimensional thing, and there are many issues involved.
In the ones that we got today, and I don't remember now where, I know we have at least one where the property is zoned RA. and they're asking it to be rezoned R1, and the property taxes are double in RA than they are in R1, and that's the major reason for the ask.
That doesn't sound
But,
right.
typically,
That's
yeah, water, the watershed protection that goes on property per acre basis. There's a rate for rural.
It's higher.
Overlay.
Quite,
Per cap on the.
like 180 versus 75.
I have a question for clarification. So I'm assuming that these, when we're talking tax, for the zoning, it is with existing facilities, homes on them? Or are we talking also bare land with zoning attached? I've heard people have asked me the question of, I want my property rezoned because my taxes will change. And they'll go down if I get it rezoned from R1 to R2. But there's nothing on it.
Okay.
So that's the question. Is I don't.
I'm just saying, it's been quite a few years since I was a tax assessor, but I still work in Annapolis. But I will tell you, when the zoning changes, again, it takes a very knowledgeable, aggressive homeowner taxpayer to seek changes in the taxes, either through tax appraisal, I forget what you call it,
Well, you can
Appeal.
appeal your assessment.
yeah, when you appeal your assessment, or you take it to the King's Court, top three, to try to get the appeals of it, because it never goes through hardly on the first time around. So I don't know, I just, it's tough. Sorry.
If you're zoned MB, but you're residential, is there a tax difference in that? Like a high tax difference in that?
Sure, because
So it's MB commercial to resident, and you're occupying it as a residential.
I think that would be big.
Yeah, okay.
So I asked this question in the finance office in the county, and they said the same thing Christina said. And that is, your tax is a function of your use, not the zoning. And so in these R1 to R10, R15, R1 to R10, change isn't going to affect your tax rate. It may affect the appraisal of your land. That's a different thing. But the county does not, as you said, Roger, state doesn't increase the tax based upon the zoning within the residential band.
On produce,
Um,
in theory. Sorry, in practice. Sorry.
So this is another one of those, an example of one of those consistency changes. So in this case, we're aligning the zoning in the parcel boundaries. So this is that example that I gave of, a house next to a commercial area. In this case, it's a park, a fairly distinctly shaped park. You can see the parcel line where my cursor is moving. And it's next to some commercial area. And so this first image over here on the left is the current zoning. And you can see here that in the open space parcel where it's a park, there's a little bit of this commercial zoning kind of on the edges. And so what we're gonna do through this process is we're gonna kind of snap the zoning to the parcel boundaries. So this is an example of, the proposed zoning that would be going to council, showing that it's cleaned up a little bit within those parcel lines, so that, yes, this is a park, it's used as a park, it should have some OS, it should be all OS zoning. And this area over here that's commercial, that can be the commercial. Another example of these consistency changes is
Software.
Another example of these consistency changes is to refine the OS zone. And so the OS zone is really intended for parks, public parks and privately owned areas that provide active and passive recreational amenities, and for platted floodplains, easements, and other preservation areas where the primary function is conservation in perpetuity. So on this image, you can see the existing zoning, and as you learned recently, this tannish color is, R1 zoning, as you can see on like the charts. And so for the most part, you know, these are residential houses. And on the back of them, there's some OS zoning in the mix. And the fact of the matter is that OS, it's been a while since anybody was out there to verify if that's should be OS. And so, you know, actually our zoning code and our land use and development regulations have pretty, our land use and development regulations have pretty tight regulations when it comes to, you know, not building your house in a wetland. And so we feel strongly that, you know, the zoning, the development regulations would protect any environmental features that may or may not be there, regardless of the zoning. So, you know, it would be proposing what's on the right, to match the zoning to the land use, to say that's a residential home. There are regulations in place that if there is an environmental feature there, you wouldn't be allowed to build there regardless of your zoning.
Hey, Jesse, can I add a couple comments?
Sure.
So, there has been a lot of discussion with, the region plans that are going through council right now about open space zoning. There are people in this room that have been involved in planning and land use for a long time, so I just want to make a couple statements for you. The definition of, in the 2009 GDP, open space, the definition of open space planned land use included natural features. When Plan 2040 got adopted in 2021, the definition was changed to take the natural features out. Because what Jesse just said, we rely on the requirements in Articles 17 and 18 to protect natural features. So there's a tendency to say, well, this is open space zoning and this is a natural feature. This should continue to be open space zoning. But we have changed the definition, and that's something the county council did. So that is the base reason that you see changes in mapping with open space.
Christina, would you define or give us examples of what you mean when you say natural features?
Could be floodplains, but not platted floodplains, just floodplains that are mapped on mapping resources by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Or could be streams. You know, anything of that nature, because you can see this open space zoning on the left. I mean, it's following some kind of stream or drainage area, right? But when that subdivision got platted, the shape of the platted floodplain is over there in the right. That's what got platted. So that's what we would continue to maintain in open space zoning.
I want to add to that. Part of the Plan 2040 process, when we were looking at land use, the land use category that was called natural features, it wasn't quantifying exactly what you would think natural features would be, which you just said, floodplain, wetland, steep slopes, etc. We were seeing we were seeing that category placed on land that was developed, land that we couldn't find using our guidance maps that we have that indicated any kind of natural features. So it lost its meaning on those maps.
It became arbitrary.
And became arbitrary. Then what you would think that would implement that natural features category would be the OS zone. They didn't align at all. And the OS boundary, which is a regulatory boundary, was arbitrary. It wasn't following our guidance maps. We couldn't figure out really what that boundary was based on. So the intent was to bring meaning to the land use category. We divided it into two, which is conservation. And the bottom definition is what we've included in conservation. And then parks and open space. Now that's the top category. That doesn't mean that we're saying no other land in the county shouldn't be conserved. It just hasn't been field checked yet. That's part of it through the development process that gets field checked. It doesn't mean it will be built on. What we found is just in all the research that we do to get to this point with the map, we're seeing a lot of errors in our guidance maps. You see something that's mapped as a wetland, it's completely built out as, you know, a commercial shopping center. Maybe years ago, it was a wetland. And without the regulations that we have in place today, that wetland was lost. So it's hard to tell, but we're trying to bring meaning back to our map.
And so then one other area we want to note is that, we're not recommending changes to, areas that are planned unit developments because they have unique agreements. And so there is one planned unit development in Region 9. It's the South River Colony. You can see it with this,
Florida looking shape, circle.
yeah, exactly. And so, for those areas, we're trying not to recommend zoning changes because of those unique agreements. So that takes the consistency piece, of trying to, you know, like I said, with that table 17 and trying to match the plan land use. But that being said, the comprehensive zoning process is comprehensive. It comes around once, you know, about every 10 years. And it is an opportunity, to analyze what we have and to look toward the future. And so with that, there is an opportunity for staff and SAC recommended zoning changes. So like I said, we've been looking at our maps. We've been going out into the community, talking to folks, checking out areas. And so with that, you know, staff may recommend a zoning change to an area. As Mike said, nothing too dramatic, nothing out of character with what we've seen throughout Region 9. But just something to either, you know, better match the development of the community or to provide for a future need. And so in those cases, the zoning recommendation may not match the adopted plan land use. It may require a recommendation to change the plan land use and the development policy area. But the wonderful thing about this process is that we're gonna talk about these all with you. We're gonna put them out for public review. And it's an opportunity for open discussion and feedback. In line with that, there was also a property owner zoning change application time period. I believe that ran from October 3 through December 15 of 2023. So folks could, you know, say, I own this piece of land. I think I might want to do this with it. What do staff and the SAC and the public think about that? And so throughout the rest of our meetings that we've got kind of set up this spring, we're going to talk about those. And it's going to be an opportunity once again for discussion and to consider, you know, what do we see currently there and what are our future needs for our community? And these are referred to as comprehensive zoning changes versus that consistency piece for consistency with the Plan 2040 plan.
Quick question. The application window, is there an open season every year? Is it ongoing or is it just this one-time shot for this planning?
Yeah, so it's about once every 10 years. Right now, we're doing it in line with the region plan. So for Region 9, it was been from earlier, like mid-fall to early winter. You know, this is a time for people have other views. We are comprehensively looking at things, but that was that time frame.
So when the plans go out for public comment, people are gonna say, oh yeah, I wanna do some rezoning. We're gonna take those applications in only during open public comment period, because if we hold them all and we don't take them, they're all gonna go to council as amendment requests, which we'd like to avoid. So I just think it's in our best interest to not allow them to come in, but we're saying only during certain periods.
And just to underscore what Christine just said it too, so these applications, there was this period that was open from October to December. There'll be a public review that happens this summertime, like in July, those comments. And then when this goes to county council, they'll have to have a formal process, and people can submit to the county council directly for changes.
Okay.
So that's happening right now with the region.
At town council.
Thank you.
So, coming out a little bit.
Question. No, could you just say again when the public comment period is? That's what I'm getting questions.
We're anticipating the summer.
The summertime.
So we want to
So
get,
at this point, everything that you've given us is hush hush. We're not to share.
this is, I'd say, so everything you guys have been given will be given to the public. But you guys get first take at it. Because we staff has a recommendation, then the SAC is gonna have a recommendation, and we're gonna show the public both those recommendations. And then the public can comment and provide input on our recommendations, or say we're all losing it and we need to come up with better ideas, I don't know. But it's this room first and then the public, that's the goal. So again, everything I send now is for SAC only at this time, right? So we're not hiding anything, but we do want you guys to, you guys were selected for a reason, we want your opinion. We'll get the public's opinion, but you 14 are here for a reason.
So I have a naive question. Which has to do with, we're doing comprehensive zoning now. But between now and the next time there's a regional plan developed, people can still apply for zoning change.
There is administrative option, but
Certainly.
that would be about it.
There's
Sharon could talk about more.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an application process and a public hearing. The decision is made by the hearing officer whether or not the exemption would happen. If people are not precluded for the next 10 years from.
No,
asking for
but-
change.
During the comprehensive process, we are not legally bound to use specific criteria to evaluate. We can look at public need, we can look at what's missing in this community. When you go outside of comprehensive zoning to the administrative hearing officer, your property has to have either met that there was a change in character of the neighborhood, like the character of the neighborhood has completely changed and you've been left behind, or that there was some mistake in the zoning. So it is harder to get an approval through the administrative hearing officer. So this is really the open time, and most counties do it this way. They allow for comprehensive zoning about every 10 years.
So essentially, I'm trying to think about or anticipate, Christina, what we say to people who ask us. You know, oh, I didn't realize we were doing this. That period of time that I could apply is closed. Am I closed out of getting my property into this process now?
So they're still gonna have more bites at the apple, because when the zoning map goes out for public comment, we would potentially take applications. We can potentially take applications when the plan goes to the planning advisory board, because that's another public comment period. And then they will still have another opportunity at the county council through another formal application. The other thing to be aware of is there are gonna be properties, I think you've got like 45 applications down here. You are not gonna recommend all of the zoning that's being asked for. All those property owners that maybe we said no along the process, they can still go to the county council and ask. So just be aware of that, and that's why I'm saying we invite you to come to county council with us.
But no one's heard those people yet, is that correct?
No, you all are just about to embark on reviewing, so. No, nobody said. Nobody's.
So in the interest of time, we have a map exercise prepared to give people hands-on learning. But I want to make sure we get through examples of how to do the Survey Monkey and how to access documents, just to make sure everybody understands what they need to do between now and the 18th.
I have a question. Does it have to be Survey Monkey? There's no way you could just like email it, and print it and hand it to you or something?
You honestly want to do that?
I'm young and I hate Survey Monkey.
Yeah, so I mean, so also, think about that, and think about how that fits into our examples. We have made it a little more simplistic than what's been done. So, and I'll open up the actual thing here in a minute, but the very first question is your name, right? So you put your name in, this is just a way for us to make sure everyone, we have way to track. So you can't move on from this if you don't put your name, so you have to put your name.
Your name.
I put Kate's name on mine.
So you hit next and save that page, it goes on to the application. I've broken it down to a couple different slides, just so we can piecemeal it. The first portion of a question is gonna be the size of the property, the currently adopted zoning, what is the zoning today? What is the current plan land use? What is OPD recommending? And then what does the applicant want? And underneath that, there'll be a screenshot. This is showing land use. And we have done our best to identify the colors into the chart above it. So you can see, okay, that looks like low density residential, looks like low medium density residential. So that's public use, just to get an idea of what's in the area, right? And this will lead to the question.
Hey, Eric, go back one second. So you're saying that what we're talking about right now is that long, narrow, skinny parcel, because there's a black outline?
Yes, correct, thank you. So each.
Thank you.
I was like, and so in the question, it does state, every question states,
It's
a property with a black outline or black X on it. So it's, we've done our best to make sure it's as obvious as possible.
And what they asked for?
Yeah.
MX.
Mixed use residential.
Again, for ignorance, why is it a pipe dream? If the person wants, and this is just for
Yeah,
education, the
great.
person wants to have a daycare or something else, why is that a pipe dream?
Well, daycare might be appropriate there, but that wouldn't be under necessarily an MXDR zoning. I mean, for
What is it?
MXDR, you're gonna have to have sewer. And just looking at how rural that is, I don't see MXDR as an option.
SDR means mixed,
Right,
mixed use with a
Right.
residential focus.
right,
And then that allows, don't correct me if I'm wrong, but up to 22 units per acre on MXDR.
Only certain uses.
Okay.
It's generally a much lower residential density. It's like a misnomer, that MXDR district.
Somebody who's been down here?
You all received the last briefing paper that was sent months ago. That lists and describes each of these different zoning districts. It's gonna sound like code for a while, because it is, these little acronyms. But in that latest briefing paper, there's a list of, okay, MXDR means this, and it'll tell you all the salient information about it. And then, yeah, it's compared to the in a graph. So if you take a PDF, you can zoom in on it.
So it's very important that you have done your homework and are doing your homework to help understand, this is where it's coming together, right? It's all coming together.
One more thing for Raj's question, that I kind of skipped over the resources we gave you too. So on your Google Drive, there is a page fact sheet that describes each of these applications. The basic information about them, things like, does it have sewer? Is it a critical area along the shoreline? So which critical area designation? Well, and it states what the owner who requested it, what their reason was. You also have in there the actual owner's application that might have some more information. Maybe it has a map, maybe it has some more in-depth discussion. No, we have redacted the names.
I got a question. On the reasons that the landowner gives for wanting X zoning change. Is that ground truth, or do you just like take that in as part of it?
Well, you're judges of character. You know, there's
I mean, you don't know these people from Adam.
there's no guarantee that what they say is what will happen in the future. And that could be for completely different reasons. They might say, I want to do a daycare, but it turns out they have some family issue and something changes, the property gets sold,
Right.
and you've given them a zoning change. Now the next person comes in and can do anything that's allowed them to set up.
But I think that's actually the Catherine Street. Is that like across from?
You may know some people who do
No. So in addition, so if we get through, I know Roger got a question, but if we get through this, because there are a couple pieces I want to show about how to make everything connect, right? Including the land use viewer, the applications on the drive, and the example from SurveyMonkey itself.
Okay, I just want to throw a little bit of my experience on this and follow up on this question. I'm gonna throw the process of 180. Because the majority of the time when I was working the problems and working zoning issues of my own, the property owner basically wants to maximize the use and the value of his property. He doesn't want to generally, unless there's something cynical behind it, but generally the landowner, the property owner, the taxpayer, they want to maximize the use of their property to benefit either him or his family. They're not looking to go in a neighborhood and throw in an incinerator or whatever. So what I think we need to look at and what I've seen lacking, not to throw stones at anybody, but is some of the common sense look at some of these zoning wants, some of these upgrades, some of the things they want to do. Zoning office, all you folks, you have your color codes and your lines and the law and everything else. What I'm going to be looking at in addition to this is common sense. Is what this landowner, is what this taxpayer want to do. If it's not going to be detrimental to his community or his neighbors, if there's no complaints, and they'll all get a chance to complain and have input, and it's not going to degrade the area or property values, I'm going to be inclined to look positively on these zoning changes. That's just my view and my experience, and I hope everybody keeps that in mind.
Well, and that's exactly why U14 was selected, right? Like we have the academic, so none of you guys don't. You guys have like the boots on the ground, right? You guys live here, you guys work here, you guys coming to and from, you guys know what works, what doesn't. We have the eye in the sky. We have the analyses, we have all the data. That's why you're gonna be part of the process. To help us, keep us in check, to keep this process in check. So if there are 14 people, there are probably 14 different mindsets when it comes to evaluating these applications and the consistency changes that we will present. So that's exactly what we're hoping for from each and every one of you, is to have your own ideas into it, which is also why we've asked you not to share this with the community, because you guys are the ones that have selected, not the community. They'll have their chance in the coming months. And then, so finally, back to the SurveyMonkey, the very bottom part is it gives OPZ recommendation, OPZ justification, and then ask you, do you agree with OPZ's recommendation? And you can answer yes, no group discussion needed. Basically, it's simple. Let's move on. Yes, but I could, if there's a time allows for it, let's talk about it. And then there's abstain. And this goes back to our ethics and conflict of interest. If you have a vested interest or you feel like you shouldn't be voting or shouldn't be discussing this from a consistent standpoint, but abstain, no problem there. And then no, we need to talk about it, and then feel free to add into why.
Key thing I'll mention there is that it's you read OPZ's recommendation. It's on each of those, you what the owner asked for and what OPZ recommended. And what we're asking you in this question is, do you agree with OPZ? Which may not be what the owner wants.
I have a quick question. So like, let's say like in this example, they wanted mixed R.
Yeah.
But maybe like, then you look at their application and then you're looking at the other, and maybe you could recommend like a happy medium, like somewhere in between that might fit their needs, but not be quite so.
Yeah, if they said they want to do the childcare, and we'll say, hey, you don't need mixed use residential for childcare, you can do that with R2 zoning or whatever it may be. That's more appropriate for the community, we can certainly recommend that. And you can see that in some of the recommendations from planning and zoning, where we've already got through
Like
that
this
too.
guy wants the garage.
That's what he says.
Yes,
Or that's what they say.
that's what he says.
Yeah. So, and that's, we're giving you exactly what was given to us. So if they apply, if they had an attachment, we've added the attachment to the folder. If they didn't, it's not there because we don't have it, because it doesn't exist. So what we're doing, one second, Bill. But what we're doing, the top part is going to be the applicant, right? The application number. What does the applicant want? What's the applicant's reasoning for what they want? Then it goes to the property information, basic property address or a tax ID number, what community is in, zoning, that kind of stuff, pretty self-explanatory. Then it goes to the staff recommendation, right? and what the staff's justification is at this time. And then it goes into that evaluation criteria, that since you guys in an email, there's points that have been, that's how we helped evaluate these applications. And that's our foundation for our justification.
So would you back up to the form, Survey Monkey form?
Yeah, please.
I can go and I will open up the actual Survey Monkey itself. So we can kind of walk through this if you guys would like. So this is your first one. I'm just gonna put test. Then hit next and it's submit.
Before you go, don't pass text. That little box. Are we gonna, is that gonna expand as we write, or were you just gonna see the only 3 words at a time that as, and have them scroll
That
back?
big block. Yeah, they gave you a much bigger.
So hopefully you don't have a lot of text. Right? But when you do get to talk about, when you do get to talk about why you want what you want.
Exactly.
The box gets bigger.
And it's bigger as well. Okay, I mean,
Just keep typing.
Yes.
I might go to the next page.
Oh, boy.
So, but with this, once you finish, so this is the deal, there's only 2 applications.
45 of them.
45, sorry. Done with, did not make multiple pages. We made your name is 1 page and then all the applications and that's it.
Okay.
So once you hit next, you submitted it.
Did them all
Really?
one time.
It is recommended you do it all one time, but that's why we put it down to 8 different surveys.
Okay, so you'll buy for West River
If you wanted to deal on a Saturday morning and then walk away till Monday and not do anything between, that's why we've done it.
Okay.
We didn't want you to do 43 in one shot. 'Cause we wanted to help avoid the confusion, avoid the frustration.
Because you wouldn't be able to sleep for the whole week.
Really helpful because I actually went and drove to some of these addresses.
I would recommend doing those.
So if I was playing around this afternoon on this and hit next and like, oh, I'll come back later, you're saying I can't go back?
If you have an issue where you can't go back, yeah, correct, because ideally there's only 2 pages, right? But if you've done it, we can go back to the back.
Well,
I need a refresh.
well, so you can't go to the next one?
There's no more. This is it.
But
For deal.
No, I mean, if you have for Shady Side, 3 applications, 2 applications,
Both.
can you skip the first one, or you can start the first one, go to the second one, and then come back to the first one?
Yeah, it's just don't hit next.
Okay,
But
next meeting, next neighborhood.
Just don't hit the next. No, don't wait.
But you would need next to go to the other one.
Don't hit done.
Yeah, so
One after.
Most of these all of these applications are already in the Google Drive, so you can read them there. Think about them, chew on them, go have a beer, whatever. You come back later when you're ready with the deals to applications.
Really ready to make
Sit down, yeah, then you're ready. Sit down, go through your survey, you can even have pre-written all your notes, stuff you wanted to write,
Well,
do those 2.
you're right. That's-
And do those 2, hit next, be done, go have another beer. But if you're doing a doc and you're
I've never heard of Google anything until this process.
Yeah.
We're forced into it.
This new way we're doing it with everything on 1 page, it does make it, you don't have to hit next to go and like look and peek and like what's going on. But what it does do is there is no way to save it. Between your name and hitting that done button, everything is just kind of in the
That's
weird
right.
space. So your computer crashes, everything's gone.
Yeah.
You go to drive and check out a site and for some reason you exited out of the window, everything's gone. So I really do recommend you either handwrite it down someplace or you write it in your notes app, whatever. Because this way is gonna make it so you can look all at once and that's perfectly fine, you're entitled to do that. But if you start it and you walk away and the dog sat on your keyboard and now everything is messed up, everything you type is gone. It's
Or
not-
have your Google Drive, or have your Google Drive document on a tablet. So you can read it on the tablet.
Exactly,
And find your screen.
exactly.
You've got 2
Or
screens.
have multiple tabs.
Worst case scenario, if something does happen where you get frustrated or you hit next, you didn't mean to, give us a call, give us an email, we'll fix it.
I got Eric's number if anybody needs it.
Yeah, we can also want a paper copy of it to like look at it, I can get you a PDF of this. That's not a.
I'm gonna do better.
One caveat to the paper, if you do paper, we would kindly recommend that you do it ahead of time for the 18th even, just so we have time to input it with the rest. So.
I'm happy to provide tech support to anybody who needs it.
Thank you.
So then one other a tool that's gonna be very helpful is the land use viewer tool. So you can put, so some, when you get some applications, all you gotta do.
You gotta check the box.
Yeah, check the box, hit okay. When you get to some applications, some may have an address, some may have a tax ID. You can insert either or up here into the search bar, right? Then you type it in, give it a half a second, it'll pop up with a number. I'll give you an example.
Don't check anyone else.
Eric.
Don't look at my property.
So the tax, so you can literally copy and paste it from the Survey Monkey document.
Agreement.
Copy and paste it into the search bar. Give it a second, see how it popped up?
Yeah, cool.
Click it, it'll take you right to that property. And you can also, same thing for the address. And when we put the tax IDs on the Survey Monkeys, we put a nearby address. A nearby address is not the property on the application, it's something nearby to help you get to the area.
Sorry, you took us to the property, meaning the blue line?
Yes, so
Thank you.
this one is, yeah, it's outlined in the light blue. If you click the X, the blue line will go away. But it'll give you that area. And then when you're here, you can turn on the critical areas, if you're interested in critical area. But as we talked about today, and you can see.
Priority funding area.
Thank you.
So you can turn it on.
Listen, they're
Development policy area overlay. And so, and then right next to it, to the left, there's a little arrow. It'll break down what each thing means. So if you're confused of what the zoning looks like here, you click the little arrow and you see how each line up. So what's the yellow? And we scroll down, it's R2, residential.
You scroll everything up a little bit, the map,
Okay.
you gotta get my house.
So this is gonna be a very helpful tool for you to help not only see the property, but the area around it. Is when, again, this whole process is a comprehensive look at zoning, not just the one property, but the area as a whole.
And please, April 18th.
The deadline is April 18th.
Just so we have.
I just say it louder.
April 18th at midnight, so April 18th at midnight, 11:59 PM, to help with clarification. Is when we would kindly ask you to please have you submitted. And then one other thing is, so it's not an application per se, but, and we're gonna get to it tonight. These community maps, it's in the same folder as the applications, I just added it today. I would highly encourage you to review these as well. These are maps and they show, it's hard to see how, but you can zoom in with this plus arrow, right? These arrows where it's shaded. These are going to be the areas of the consistency changes, recommended consistency changes. So we will be discussing these on April 20th. So please get familiar a little bit with the areas, your communities, just so we can have conversations and we can understand why things are being recommended in certain ways. If you guys agree, or if you think there should be more different changes, this is an opportunity for the SAC and staff and the public eventually come up with recommendations for zoning and region.
These are in addition to the request from homework.
Correct.
Yeah, and you can see also on here, the owner requests are on here as well. And they've got all these fancy numbers. CZ for comprehensive zoning, R9 for region 9. And then the 3 letters like TLD, Tracy's Landing, made acronyms out of the communities. And then a number. So this little parcel here is that application that was submitted for reading. And this is in hash marks over here that shows that this is a consistency change.
Keep moving it so Mike can chase it.
Yeah.
The consistency change is something that the county is doing that's not an application by a landowner?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, let me just try this out. So, the colors here are the current zoning. So for example, this currently is this light green, as you'll become familiar, look at these things, your eyes get tired, is RA. So it's a rural agricultural zone. This has hash marks over it, and then there's little labels on it that say OF, because we're proposing that change to OF. Because in Plan 2040, we did research on the property, found out there's a conservation easement on it. This part in the middle here, it was platted out as floodplain, is a perpetual, long-term conservation of this property. So we're gonna recommend that, because that meets that definition that Ms. Carrier mentioned earlier about conservation land use. That we're gonna put OS zoning. And that is basically a recommendation from Office of Planning and Zoning that is consistent with Plan 2040. So Plan 2040, we changed the planned land use that was adopted by council, went to review the zoning. Now we're saying the zoning should align with that adopted plan.
About how many of those are there?
I don't have a rec count on my head.
Probably a lot.
About 2,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This you can scroll down, look at how the OS look, and then just like in the example that that Jesse showed earlier, kind of a winding OS, it was probably mapped roughly around some kind of stream or ravine. But we're recommending the hash mark over it, so that we're making a change, and then say this should go to the RA to match what's the rest of the control.
And then with the number, is an individual application.
So, and you guys are going with the Survey Monkeys, we have it set up, you provide input immediately on those applications. But just as important, we need your recommendations and input on these consistency changes as well. Everything's a big piece, everything's a big puzzle, and both are equal pieces, right?
We'll discuss these in the next meeting with the group.
But you have these maps on your drive to begin reviewing. We will go into a more in-depth group discussion on the 20th. But if you, please get started, just at least glancing over them, if not really looking at them.
Survey Monkey questionnaire on it.
Correct. Only the questionnaire monkey, only the surveys are for its applications.
But the consistency changes, like the bigger areas like pictured here. Now, we will get the landowner information. Will.
Yeah, like, is there a house
Like,
on that
have they
property?
been notified?
They will be notified after it goes through this process, right? We're gonna, that thing's.
After,
Before it goes to council, after you guys discuss.
Okay.
Yeah, after your conversation.
Look at the map and then mail me and be like, actually, I live there. Please don't change that. And we'll review that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll send out letters
So,
as it's being reviewed by.
so we are recommending changes without consulting the people who actually live on the property?
yes.
If they live there, I mean, it might just be, I
If
mean, a
they-
lot of that stuff is just, it's forest.
Again, a lot of these consistency changes are what Jesse described earlier, the parcel line, zoning line alignments, snapping it together. The OS work we've been doing, as well as making sure that land use that was just adopted in Plan 2040 is consistent with the zoning. So if the land use is inconsistent, we've recommended a change to the zone, which is outlined here.
So you guys have actually been to these areas where you're recommending zoning to OS? You ground truth this stuff? Or just like doing it via maps?
Satellite.
See, we're doing the.
We do a lot of deed. And we have databases of conservation easements. Some of them are requests.
Well, you, it's like the OS there, there's a creek there.
Again, down.
So you just looked at the map knowing there's a creek there and said that we're gonna run it further up the creek.
I think the one that's doing it in spaces further up. It's getting rid of the OS.
Yeah.
So the other one that they're changing to OS is up a little bit further. and it's a-
Oh, it's just a bigger hash.
Just that one.
Yeah.
No,
That's what we're talking about.
they're different.
Okay. There's nobody that. That's the.
Agree with their recommendation.
No, we're already on.
But
Wait a minute.
so many of them, they're meant to line. Some that like this where it's that change.
So it looks like you got a little triangle, is that triangle?
That's application.
That's why it has a long.
That's outside of the
So
consistent, it's outside of.
coincidentally,
Correct.
the
Across,
coincidentally
correct.
part of this.
It's adjacent.
Yep.
It's across the street. They're asking for R5.
Mm.
I'm just kidding.
So again, if you have questions between now and ideally, if you have questions, the better we can help out. And we'll be doing a lot of communication. If someone asks a really good question, the group should be aware of, we will send that out to everybody. We'll send reminders if you haven't completed your surveys, but we are here to help. Do not be afraid to call us, unless you're Bill. But do not be afraid to call us, do not be afraid to email us, we're here to help you. I know there's a lot of questions, we're gonna do a lot of conversation on the 20th. A whole meeting is gonna be dedicated to a group discussion, hands on the maps, that kind of stuff.
So sorry, just for clarification, the consistency planning will just be discussed during the April 20th meeting. We have nothing prior to do other than look on it and familiarize ourselves with
No,
it.
we
Survey monkeys.
You gotta do the monkeys.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah.
The consistency planning, we're doing nothing prior in terms of survey, et cetera. We're just coming and discussing.
And the monkey is for the people who have submitted changes.
Right.
Right.
And I would just like to say that, I mean, we're joking about, I'm calling these guys, but they are very responsive, email wise and phone call wise. So, you can't get that good a service with the DNR.
Right, we are gonna start from south and move north. It goes from simple to more complex, plus, we've done a lot of previous meetings, as folks have noticed, we tend to go from north and south, very intentionally, that it goes from south to north. You are running out of time next week, and you haven't, got your homework done, start from south and go north. And hey, if you didn't get your Edgewater Mayo done, that's where half the applications are, we're gonna talk about that a couple weeks later, maybe we can be okay with that coming in.
But in a perfect
You
world.
shouldn't have said
everything
that.
done.
Yeah.
Right. We dedicated a separate, we dedicated a separate meetings. to make sure we can move as efficiently
I'm on it.
as possible, so please, I know it's a lot of work, there's 43 applications.
I don't see technology.
Yeah,
One other thing to like to point out,
we're learning something in that over that, yeah.
we had the Survey Monkey for the meeting reference. 10 people said they could attend on the 20th. That will be at the Southern District Police Station. We absolutely need a quorum to have a meeting. So if you cannot attend, or if you said yes, and you can attend, let us know just so we can keep an active count. And we don't want to wake up early on a Saturday, go see.
I definitely don't.
Is there a virtual option?
There could be a Southern.
Can we have a virtual
Well,
option?
I know we probably don't need it, but tell them to turn the heat on.
Yeah.
Now we're all bouncing back and forth, everybody's talking over each other, and if you're trying to say something on Zoom, it can get kind of complicated. Plus, there's not a guarantee that you'll see what we're saying in the room, so
We will start using paper maps.
I'm still requesting a virtual option, because I can sign in and be a part and not talk, but I can be in the
Yes,
meeting.
you would be able to hear, but we would really prefer, if possible, that people be there first. There will be a Zoom like there always
Not
is.
possible, so I'm
Yeah,
requesting
yeah.
a Zoom.
So just by a quick show of hands, is the 20th, again, fine, we make the 20th.
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want,
How many do we
I don't
have?
want to waste anybody's time. because-
Oh, what? That's a good excuse.
So and if you cannot attend,
Oh.
please do the Survey Monkey. It's even more of an incentive to do it, because that's how we can hear your voice, your ideas, your opinions. If you're not gonna.
I know. Everybody on
There's only one person online, Richard Israel, if you wish to speak. Please unmute yourself. If not, you can stay muted.
I've just enjoyed listening.
Not fair. So, of our guests that are here, is there anyone who wants to come forward? You have 2 minutes to make comment.
No.
No?
Done it, have you had fun? That's the most important.
Sorry, no beer.
In advance of our motion to adjourn, I was on the phone yesterday with someone who worked on the Region 7 SAC. And when I told her we were doing 3-hour meetings times 9 in 9 months, and we were getting to land use this month. She was enormously jealous and said OPZ has got its shit together.
Benefiting from that.
And we do want to thank you, and we'll see it again multiple times, but we really can't tell you guys enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We know it's a lot for an unpaid position. You gotta give a lot of your time, and you guys are about to give a lot more of your time in the next 2 weeks. So.
Here's the fun part.
So you confirm,
Yeah, we will confirm back.
all right,
You need a motion to adjourn?
I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Yeah, once.
Thank you, guys.